Welcome to The Game. This is the show where we go play by play analyzing the game of politics. Today we have an exciting show with a great lineup of guests. We're going to be looking at the big bet that Texas Republicans are making on Latinos as they're redrawing this map, as they're hoping that this will give them or keep the majority that they have in Congress. We're also going to be looking at the impact beyond Texas. What is California, states like Illinois, possibly North Carolina, Florida? What might they do once Texas has established their possible new map? What are the ripple effects in this area? We're also going to be looking at a possible Democrat comeback in the sense that they want to be able to have the White House back in 2028, but they have to look first at 2026. Who are their leaders? Who are the ones that are going to be messaging and carry the baton for Democrats? And finally, we're going to be talking about immigration. What is the latest news on this topic? Is there any kind of window for reform? Who are the key players on this topic? Now, joining me for this conversation, we have Sabrina Rodriguez. She is a political reporter for the Washington Post. She covers the White House, Congress, several campaigns. Sabrina is someone who's constantly traveling across the country to check on the pulse of the American people. Sabrina, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
También in studio, we have Soledad Cedro. She is the managing director of Tactic Global. She's a political strategist and consulting. Well, Tactic Global is a political strategist and consulting firm, correct? Soledad,
yes,
did I get that? All right, there we go. We got it. She previously served on, she was the comms director for Mayor Suarez. She has a long resume. Soledad, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Wadi, for the invitation.
All right, very exciting. Like we said, there's a big bet going on with Latino voters in Texas. Republicans in 2024 did not just make several gains nationally, but also in areas like Texas, where historically has gone Republicans. But we zoom in and we look at areas like the Rio Grande Valley. There have been shifts that have been very positive for Republicans. Part of the reason that many folks are looking at this region, what does this shift mean for the future? What does it mean immediately with this possible new map in Texas? Sabrina, I want to start with you. You were recently in the Rio Grande Valley. You were in areas like McAllen, Mission, Hidalgo County, talking to voters down there, talking to several of these folks. Like I mentioned, historically, the Rio Grande Valley hasn't been a place where Republicans have made gains. It's been, if anything, in Texas, a stronghold for Democrats. However, we did see some shifts in 2024. When you were down there, what were some of the conversations that you were having? Are these voters baked in for Republicans? Are these voters more independent? Or is there something that Republicans should be looking at that maybe they haven't been paying attention to?
Yeah, I mean, Wally, part of why I went down there was because, I mean, there were so many headlines after the 2024 election about, how well President Trump did with Latinos. I think for Democrats, it was a bit of a shock. I remember leading up to the election, there was this belief, well, no, there's no way that, so many Latinos are going to flock toward President Trump, especially with his immigration policy. There's a lot of baked in assumptions about how Latino voters pick candidates and who exactly they will support. So there was a lot of shock in kind of the DC political world around how well Trump did. And South Texas is one of those places that showed it the most. In South Texas, when you look at the Rio Grande Valley, those counties have been Democratic strongholds for decades. I mean, Hidalgo County, where I went to, voted for Trump. It was the first Republican to win that county in more than 50 years.
Wow.
The next door county, Starr County, hadn't voted for a Republican candidate in over 100 years.
Wow.
So we're talking about huge shifts. Now, that didn't happen overnight. That is something that has happened in recent election cycles because of a lot of work that Republicans have been putting in. Democrats themselves down there will tell you that they took people for granted, that they kind of assumed that Latinos there would always vote Democrat. And then you had Republicans start coming in, start spending money, start knocking on doors, start asking people, well, do you feel like your life has gotten better by voting for Democrats all these years? And even just asking that question sort of opened the door for people to vote for Trump. So while I was down there, was sort of interrogating, well, a lot of people, who had been historically Democrats voted for Trump. Does that mean they're going to vote, Republican in the future? And I got a range of answers. I think a lot of people, what happened now is they're open-minded. They might not love everything that Trump is doing, but there's sort of an open door to explore both sides rather than say, oh, I'm dead set one party.
And that can create an opportunity for Republicans, but it also can create an opportunity for Democrats if it seems that they are keeping an open mind. With some of the individuals that you talk to, Miss Cuellar, one of them being one of the folks down there, one of the voters, it seems like there are a lot of emotions, there are a lot of concerns, there's a lot of desires that voters have, either of expectations of this current administration. Do you think expectations have been met, or are there areas where maybe they're just not as aligned? I think, many times voting polls show that people look at the economy, they look at immigration, healthcare, education, these wide range of issues. Although there might not be 100% alignment on all of them, there's some that might stand out more. In your conversations, are folks mostly looking at the economy? Are they happy with the sort of new trade deals, or possibly the tariffs, the revenue coming in from there? Or are they looking at topics like immigration, and how are they balancing these priorities?
Yeah, it was a little bit of everything, Wally. At the end of the day, the economy is typically, we see it in poll after poll. This isn't exclusive to Latinos. This is across demographic groups. The economy is the number one issue. People want to be able to provide for their families, to move ahead, to improve their lives and be able to, at a minimum, make ends meet. So that was the number one thing. And, a lot of people, when they talked about why they had voted for President Trump, it was largely because of that. It was because of this belief that, one man explained to me, the reason we all voted for Trump is because we want prosperity. And that's sort of the way that they looked at it. Right now, I think there's a little bit of frustration. There's a feeling of, okay, we're almost 8 months into his presidency. I don't necessarily feel that the economy has improved to the level that I would want it. I think on the economy, though, there's a little bit of open-mindedness of, okay, these are all things that take time. They see the president, moving forward with his trade policy. They see that, Trump is someone who's very open to breaking things and not doing things the traditional way. So a lot of the people that I talked to kind of welcomed that and felt like, okay, they were kind of making the bet that there would be a long-term gain with that. The one that I felt, the one that was definitely the hardest on Trump, the issue that they were the most critical of him on, was immigration. A lot of people down there are feeling firsthand. A lot of folks have, mixed status families, or just live in communities that have, a lot of mixed status families. So a lot of people like Yesenia Cuellar, she's a middle school teacher, and she was talking about, that she's firsthand seen it, that at the end of the last school year, there was a lot of students who stopped coming to class. You'd start to hear the stories about, families who have been deported, families, parents who she knew, were just hardworking people who had been in the country, working for decades, but had come into the country illegally, be deported. So hearing those stories, that was an area that people definitely repeatedly said they wanted Trump to reverse course. A lot of people, I think, thought he was only going to focus on violent criminals. So to then see him, potentially deport someone's neighbor who they've known and loved for years, of course, doesn't sit well, and sort of creates that tension for people of, I didn't meet a single person that said they regretted voting for President Trump, but it put them in an awkward position where they were like, well, I don't like what Democrats have done or are doing, and I maybe don't really love what the president is doing on this front.
Yeah, a very interesting topic. The Rio Grande Valley is fascinating when it comes to the topic of immigration, because they really are on the front lines. Something that for years they have been familiar to or have to deal with is the flow of folks coming in unlawfully. The first arrival place, especially sort of that port in McAllen, when folks were turning themselves in during the Biden years or being caught, apprehended, that is the area where they would go to. Many of those families have family members who work as border patrols. They understand the nuances of, sometimes, unfortunately, there are bad actors, people who do come in, who do commit crime. They see that firsthand. It's also generations of individuals who have been there for 3 to 4 generations. So the topic of immigration is one that they understand very much, the nuances, the importance of border security, but also the contributions that immigrants make. Soledad, I want to ask you, Trump did carry many of these districts. Some of the numbers that Sabrina talked about, in 100 years, some of these districts or some of these counties hadn't voted Republican, or even 50 years in others. but there was a lot of ticket splitting. There were some of these folks who voted Trump, but then the local member of Congress was a Democrat, and they won their race. The local mayor won their race. So it does seem like there is this open-mindedness. What does this mean for Republicans locally? What kind of focus should they put into Latinos? How do they convert these folks who maybe voted for the first time Republican into voters who are long-term, sort of part of their voter base? And then the second part, if I'm what do Democrats do with all of this as well?
I think that if there's a silver lining here, is that both parties started to understand in the last cycle. This has been ongoing for many years, but in the last election cycle, started to understand that first, you cannot take for granted anybody. No community can be taken for granted. And second, Latinos are not a monolithic community. We are diverse. We are millions in this country. And above everything else, we're Americans. Yes, our country of origin or our families can come from somewhere else, but whomever is voting here in the U.S., except for maybe some exceptions that we've seen in some places, it's because you are an American. And once you're an American, what's your number one concern? Sabrina just said it. We all know it. Providing for your family, the economy. For years, the only thing both parties, or mostly Democrats, because Republicans were not even talking to Latinos, but mostly Democrats, the only thing they've been talking to Latinos about was immigration, which poll after poll after poll, and you know this perfectly, Wadi, after poll, it is it might be among the top 5 issues, but it never comes as the number one or not even the number 2 issue in the mind of voters. So the silver lining is that they're starting to understand that as a community, they need to put an effort on us. Something that the Trump team understood, and that's why we saw these historical numbers there. But that being said, I hope they understand that it's not a done deal. They cannot take for granted those votes.
They can't
make the way Democrats did.
Yeah, that's exactly the point I was going to make. They can't make the same mistake that Democrats kind of made it at a point where I think some people sort of understood it slightly. Like, hey, you've won this group for so many years, right? If you look at a lot of polls or historically how black members of the black community have voted, there's some similarities in the sense that I think Democrats have taken that vote for granted as well, and maybe not invested as much as they probably should. They made the same mistake with Hispanics, but now they're paying the price. So to the second part of that question, what do Democrats do in the midst of all this?
Okay, I think that everybody, not just Democrats and Republicans, if they want the Latino vote, they need to start, number one, listening to them. What are their concerns and bring in solutions. That's what everybody expects from their politicians, to bring solutions to real problems. That being said, one thing is national politics and another thing is local politics. And you made this point. A lot of them made this split decision of voting Democrat for their local election and Republican for the national election. Why do I think this happened? Because it's harder sometimes to change hearts when you're at a local election. Why? Because locally, you tend to vote for people you know, people that you see when you go to your supermarket, that probably their kids go to the same school your kids go, that are part of your community. So it's not that much just about the ideas. For example, when it comes to national politics, number one concern is the economy. Who do I think might be better suited to fix the problem that we have with the economy? Evidently, they voted for President Trump for that. It's an idea. Now he has to deliver. Then we'll see. He has in 2026, he will be tested again. But the idea was sold to them. It's not that simple to sell an idea when you're a part of that community. When you're running for mayor and you're a part of that community, it's not just about an idea. People need to see that consistently you've been investing in your community, working for your community. That's why I think it was not just a matter of them voting Democrat, but probably voting for people that they knew. So what I think Republicans have to do at a local level is start working in the communities. Get people. This is not a manufacturer type of, when you're running for mayor, you cannot be, and this doesn't work anywhere in the world, a manufacturer type of candidate. You need to be someone that was bred into that community, that was formed into that community, because this is your best credential, being a part of this community, being committed to that community. And I think that both parties need to identify candidates who have been active in the community if they want to win people's votes.
Yeah, they need to see folks who have been active so they continue to be active. On that point, Sabrina, I'm curious to get your prediction. Do you think these plays being made by Texas Republicans, which really have sort of come from that motivation from President Trump, who has said, hey, let's redraw these maps. They've also given other reasons, but really when we look at the bottom of it, it looks like it's all focused on 2026. Do you think, after talking to several of these folks, do you believe this could play out? Is there a chance that although, like to Soledad's point, that politics is very local, and it seems like for years locally, Democrats have at least been present in the Rio Grande Valley, do you think that Trump effect will trickle down and possibly we'll see those 5 new seats maybe go to Republicans? Will this play out for them?
I mean, I think that's the million-dollar question right now. I'm always cautious to make predictions, but I think from talking to both sides, from talking to Republicans and Democrats in South Texas, it's clear that there is an awareness that South Texas is in play. South Texas is going to remain in play. This is going to remain a competitive area. And some folks, Democrats even, who of course are still reeling from losses in 2024, are even acknowledging that that's a good thing. It's a good thing for democracy to have competitive districts, to have people having to fight for it, having to earn people's votes. So I think what we know for sure is that these districts have now become in South Texas more competitive, that Republicans are certainly launching the effort. I think in some of the seats it's a gamble, but there's no question that with these new maps, there are up to 5 new seats, open for Republicans to win.
Yeah, the debate around which way will the Latino vote go is a conversation that is not going anywhere. It's a debate that we're going to continue to look at year after year, which is very positive. Our community is one that is growing. It is one that we have a lot of political capital. But I do want to go now beyond Texas. I want to talk about what are those states that possibly might also start looking at redoing their maps. Sabrina, kind of quickly to you, what are the states that you're hearing, that you're looking at, that if Texas, again, all signs pointing that their maps will go to the governor's desk and there will be a new map, what are the states that you think will also take those steps? What are the governors that have been vocal about also possibly taking steps to redraw those maps?
Yeah, so we've already seen Governor Gavin Newsom in California taking those steps. Of course, part of this is against the backdrop that Newsom is very much considered someone who wants to run for the Democratic Party for president in 2028. But Newsom has sort of become that big figure in the Democratic Party, trying to, fight with Trump and trying to, as Democrats look for someone to try to form an opposition against Trump, Newsom has sort of been that figure. So as soon as we saw moves happening in Texas with the maps, Newsom started saying, well, if they're going to do it, I'm going to start exploring doing it in California, a very blue state with a lot of congressional seats. As of right now, what we've seen in these past recent days is California take those steps. There, they have to pass a ballot initiative, though, that would allow them to change the map. So they can't do it the same way that Texas has done through their state legislature. But we're seeing that in California, they would put on the ballot in 2025, ask voters if they're open to them changing the maps, which would be 5 congressional seats to basically erase the gains that Republicans are seeking in Texas. Now, that's the big 2 players in this right now, Texas and California, but we're seeing both parties kind of look to where they have opportunities in other states. Republicans are pressing a lot in Indiana, where they think they could potentially get 1 more seat. There's conversations about potentially my home state, your home, Florida. There's conversations about potentially, Governor DeSantis wanting to kind of step into this as well. And then on the Democratic side, there's discussions around Maryland, around Illinois, and potentially New York, although that one would be harder to do ahead. That wouldn't be possible to do ahead of the midterms.
So how does this all play out politically, right? So even like to Sabrina's point, California is trying to take the next step to kind of erase the possible gains that we might see in Texas, right? And then 1 seat in Indiana, a couple seats in Florida, but then New York steps in, and Illinois. I mean, have we opened a can of worms, and who stands to really benefit? I mean, it's tough to tell, right? Like, I mean, we'd have to see who actually wins these races, because I've even seen some reporting where in Texas they have to be very careful, because as you're sort of squeezing out these districts, races that before for Republicans were well established, now they might become more competitive. I've heard the same thing in California. The Central Valley is very conservative. Places where Congressman David Valadao, Congressman Jeff Denham, all Republicans have won races there. If California moves their map, it might even become more competitive for some of these Democrats. So again, to the main question, how does this all kind of play out? Are we just really going to look at the next 6-7 months and it's just states redrawing their maps? Is this going to take away from the economic message? Is this something that Democrats actually can win with in the long term?
The way I say it, first of all, this is not something new. This has happened before many times in pretty much every single state. Here in Florida, we're all from Florida.
Mostly in the 10-year mark versus the 5-year mark, but the redrawing has happened.
The redrawing has happened. So this is not something new. This might help one party or the other, depending on the case, to win 1 or 2 seats. But I don't think that this is going to be something that will create huge type of change. This is one of these issues that I think that people who are in politics will love to discuss about this. Journalists who write about politics love to discuss about this. DC loves to obsess about this.
Yeah.
But the reality is that when you go to the supermarket, nobody cares about that. I don't think that any mom who's buying food for tonight to prepare dinner, or any person who went out to work today all day is concerned about the electoral map in their state. These are not I don't think these are the kind of things that make a huge impact on voters.
Yeah.
This might help with technicalities. So we win 1 seat here, 1 seat there. But the big picture, it's going to be, how is the economy? How are people feeling? Can they afford their way of life? Do they feel safer than they felt 2 years ago? Are they happy with the way things are going in the country? I don't think anybody is going to be concerned about, oh, my map changed.
Yeah, I think the conversation, while the shifts in the maps will sort of propel more competitive races at the end of the day, it's not that you automatically have it. It's not that it's your seat.
Yes.
It does give that aid, but you still have to do the work to show up and be part of it.
I think they give the basis for technicalities, and yes, you might gain something out of that, but it's not going to be a huge shift.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you have to do the work for it.
You need to do the work.
Yeah, and I do want to move on to now focusing a little bit of the conversation that we have had is, what does 2026 look like? And I want to zoom in on Democrats. There doesn't seem to be a leader that's been established as who is moving the ball forward, right? Many times it tends to be a Speaker of the House or a majority leader, but Democrats don't have that. Obviously, when it's the president of your party, that person tends to be the leader. The sort of leadership of Democrats for years was Nancy Pelosi, Schumer. These are individuals who are not in leadership positions in their majorities, but they're also, some would argue, the sort of old wave of Democrats. I mean, I think Democrats are searching for that new leader. They're searching for that new voice. And this comes as the New York Times is reporting a study that they did on voter registration, where 30 of the states who are reporting voter registration numbers, they saw a dip in absolutely all 30 of them. This has given the GOP, in addition, 4.5 million voters, a deep political hole that's becoming difficult for Democrats. In the midst of this, people talk about Gavin Newsom. Folks are talking about different governors from different states, senators. But there's also, I think, someone who hasn't been in the spotlight as much, and it's Senator Ruben Gallego. He's someone who won in the state of Arizona, that historically for many years, the state of John McCain, of Jeff Flake, what for many times was a stronghold for Republicans. He's the first, if I'm not mistaken, Hispanic senator to come from the state of Arizona. Sabrina, you've interviewed him in the past. He was in Iowa not too long ago talking about 2028 and what the party needs to do. What, in your opinion, was the main message from Senator Gallego to Iowa? And second, do you think he is a possible model for Democrats to look at or senators to look at as the future of the party?
Democrats are looking at Senator Gallego as a potential model for sure because they just look at the numbers don't lie here. We see Gallego win in an election where Trump won. So the state of Arizona people, to the way that we were just talking about South Texas ticket splitting, there was ticket splitting that took place in Arizona, a key battleground state as well. And we see that Gallego did well with working class voters. He did well and generally well with working class voters, with Latino men, with some of the groups of people who President Trump has consistently made inroads with in his presidential runs, and particularly in 2024. So when he went to Iowa, Gallego's traveling around the country right now, generating a lot of buzz about if he has presidential aspirations. Naturally it's 2025. His answer is no, he's not running for president,
As always.
but it's not lost on anyone that he's, going to Iowa, and then he's going soon to New Hampshire, and, he went and gave a speech in Pennsylvania in a swing county. But his big message in all of these speeches is him trying to give Democrats, one, a message of hope, because a lot of people are still, again, reeling from the loss in 2024, but also trying to say, okay, we lost our way. We need to start finding our way back to talking to people, to just which sounds like the most basic thing, of course, but finding it, kind of giving Democrats the template and saying, I went out and I talked authentically to people because I am a real person and I talk about the real concerns that are happening in my family, the real struggles that we've had. And that's how I've connected with people. And he said, Democrats have focused so insularly in the past, and we need to be reaching out to people. Instead of spending time criticizing people who voted for Donald Trump, why not spend time talking to them to understand why they voted for Donald Trump? So I think he's really trying to bring out this message that people in the Democratic Party need to stop judging other people, stop, saying this is the right way, and kind of move away from maybe the politically correct culture, I hate to say, but the woke culture, kind of move away from that and really just have real conversations with people. And that's what I've heard him say, repeatedly as he goes to these different states to talk to Democrats.
Yeah, la otra cara de la moneda, the other side of the coin, is that there are other candidates. Soledad Mamdani in New York, who has a very different approach, I would say, than Senator Gallego, who comes from sort of a conservative Arizona state. But Mamdani's not the only one. You have now the state senator in Minnesota who's running for mayor in Minneapolis, just received a huge endorsement from the party. He's part of the Democrat Socialist Party, but has seen more Democrats come around him as he looks to unseat a current Democrat. So the other side of this is that there is sort of a socialist, I would even say sort of a socialist trend among Democrats, the more progressive left, that is also a possible model. We had Christian Daytalk from the Washington Examiner here last week, and he talked about the rise of the Tea Party sort of as a response to President Obama. And he says that he saw similar trends now with the Democrat socialist as a response to Trump. There's a battle within the Democrat Party. Sabrina just talked about sort of the model of Ruben Gallego. What is your opinion? What are Democrats facing when they look at people like Mamdani and State Senator Faye on more of a socialist wing? Is that something that could work nationwide in a place like the United States?
Honestly, I don't think that can work. And I hope that doesn't work because coming from South America, I know firsthand that doesn't work, that socialism doesn't work. I'm a Republican, and as a Republican, I'm way more concerned about someone like Gallego than the woke extreme left model. It's been proven that it doesn't work. It's been proven that in general, it might work in a place like New York City, but most of the country doesn't look like New York City. I don't think the U.S. is looking for this type of leaders. I'm not concerned about a Gavin Newsom, to be honest. I think that Newsom is a spectacular debater, a spectacular candidate for the media and that people can consume on TV. But the reality is that California is a mess, that he has nothing to prove that he's a good leader. record numbers of people leaving California. The numbers of the state are absolutely horrible. Highest taxes in the nation, highest criminality rates. It's a mess. So I'm not really concerned about Gavin Newsom, even though he's the most vocal one right now. And also I think that he's peaking too soon. We are really far away from an election, so I think he's peaking too soon. I don't think that the United States it's ready right now, and I'm not making a judgment about this if it's good or bad, but I don't think that the U.S. is ready nationwide for Muslim candidates. I think that most of the people in the United States identify with Christian, Jewish values, so it's very hard to identify with different type of values. It's completely different issue in a place like New York City that might be extremely progressive. It's a completely different issue in a place like Minnesota where you have a big Muslim community. But nationwide, I don't think that this is the type of message or the type of candidate that will resonate. That being said, a Latino being the number one minority in the nation that comes from a conservative background because Arizona is a conservative place, that it's doing the real work, that it's talking to people, that it's listening to them, that it's not mocking at people who voted for Trump, but it's trying to understand them. I think, and this goes against what I want because I'm a Republican, but I think that could be a winning ticket for Democrats.
Ruben Gallego is somebody who I think can prove not just that he has sort of the talent or the background for that, but if he makes the right moves in the Senate, I think trying to draw bipartisan conversations, I think we'll continue to hear about him in that. I do want to go to our last segment. We want to talk about immigration. We talked a little bit about it in the first segment of the conversations people are having in the Grand Valley, the current landscape on immigration. We're seeing a strong focus from the White House on deportations. They're talking about how they're taking out criminals. But like Sabrina said earlier, for some people, they thought the focus was going to be a little bit more specific on nonviolent criminals. There's a lot of good there in the sense they've taken people out from El Tren de Aragua. But again, we've seen videos in areas that for many people are concerning. There's a lot on border security as well. Numbers that dropped from the last 4 years of folks trying to come in illegally. There's now the Dignity Act from Maria Salazar. Congresswoman also de la Cruz has the Bracero program legislation that she wants to push forward. At a glance, Sabrina, I want to ask you, we've seen a lot of sort of this year one focus from the White House. High deportation numbers, border security. Do you believe they have a strategy or there's an appetite for a year 3 and 4 strategy that goes beyond interior enforcement and that goes beyond deportations, border security? Is there any path where they do focus on the Dignity Act or on foreign workforce visas? What's your opinion there?
I mean, right now we haven't really seen an appetite from the White House to want to kind of push something through Congress on this front. We saw that in, President Trump's big, beautiful bill, the massive tax and spending package that, there was a lot of money put towards enforcement, towards border enforcement. That's been a huge priority, for the president and something that we've heard, it's not a surprise. It's something we've heard President Trump talk about from even before he first ran for president. So a lot of that money is going to be, start to be implemented, start to be spent on, hiring more border patrol agents, on, modernizing things along the border, trying to focus on that border security and the enforcement that they're trying to do throughout the country. So we haven't heard too much about, tangible things that he wants to get done in Congress. Depending on, of course, this is a president who talks frequently and regularly. So he's out talking to the media and has talked about potential visas he'd want to pursue, or has talked about, wanting to protect, construction workers or hotel workers or farm workers, and has talked about different groups of immigrants that he would want to see protections for, but we haven't necessarily seen tangible steps taken. We've seen, a lot of the advisors he has in the White House around him are particularly hardline on immigration. But then you have people like Congresswoman Maria Salazar who's saying, if we want to continue to win Latinos and we want to continue to, make inroads with this community and do the humane thing, we need to pass some type of immigration reform. But of course, I think we all know, we've all seen, Congress time and time again has failed to coalesce around some type of immigration reform. I think it's notable, though, that the Congresswoman has bipartisan support on that bill. I think she really wants to kind of bring together people around that. But with the hardline immigration side of the party, I think it's going to be very tough to build some type of package that could pass. But again, I mean, we're less than a year into President Trump's presidency, right? So, and he cares a lot about the numbers, he cares a lot about the politics. So anything is possible when we're looking towards, Republican performance in 2026 and 2028.
So that kind of quickly, I kind of want to ask you the same question, taking into consideration that President Trump, like Sabrina said, nothing has been done in that space, but he has signaled, he has talked about that he has, as a person of business who's had several hotels, who's worked in the construction space through real estate, he understands these demographics and the importance of immigration. Let's also remember, he's the president who got the First Step Act done across, signed into law, criminal justice reform that many people would have never thought Republicans would have done, and maybe not even President Trump. Kind of quickly, what do you think? What's your analysis here?
I think that if there's one thing that defines President Trump is that he's a pragmatic person. And I understand that we were in such a chaotic point in as a nation a year and a half ago with an open border, with criminality numbers going up, and I don't know if this is directly related to immigration or not, but it was the perception that it was directly there was a connection, tying both issues together. That I understand that it haven't been the priority. That being said, there's no way our economy can work without having immigrants.
Yeah,
there's no way, absolutely no way, and I think that President Trump understands that. And I think that at some point we will move on from this crisis mode that we might still be at, and we'll start thinking through, okay, what do we need? What do we need for our economy to be stronger? And I think that changing some of our outdated immigration laws, it's a good way to help our economy. And I'm confident that this administration will understand that. Even though there are a lot of people, advisors, who are very against immigration, but we've seen before that advisors come and go.
They come and go.
House. Yeah.
Correctly. Well, this is a topic that's not going to come and go. The topic of immigration will continue to be front and center. We'll continue to cover it here. I want to thank Soledad Cedro for being here, Sabrina Rodriguez as well. I'd love to have you both here on the show again. Maybe we'll do even a small debate, si el mate argentino or if el cafecito cubano, which beverage is more popular or better. I think I know which one Soledad would say and which one Sabrina would say.
Worst Argentine ever, but I love Cuban coffee.
Uf, imagínate.
Oh, and I love mate too, so
we're good. We can be friends.
I want to hear this debate then. La cubana defendiendo el mate y la argentina defendiendo el café cubano. I love it. That kind of commentary, you only get it here on The Game, the show where we go play by play, analyzing the game of politics. We'll see you next time.